Okay, sounds good.
Hi, good evening. How are we doing? Good. I'm Kevin Gettings. I'm with WSOS 103.9, and we're a radio station that's licensed right here at St. Johns County, Ponte Vedra, and St. Augustine. So I'm privileged to be here with you all tonight. Thank you very much for being here. Obviously, our crowd, our size may have been impacted a little bit about some rainstorm that's coming our way. But we appreciate each of you being here. So thank you very much. A couple of things. One, if you could turn your cell phones off, that would be great. We'd really appreciate that. And then at some point, we're going to get, after this presentation, it's going to be fairly brief, I will come around and give you the opportunity to ask questions. I'm going to hold on to the microphone, but I'll come to you. You could probably help me if you're sitting in the middle, if you could somehow get to the sides, and we'll proceed in that way. My job here tonight is pretty basic. I want to make the absolute best use of your time and the time of these gentlemen that are behind me. So that's the task I have, is to make this efficient and get you as much information as possible in a short period of time. We also have people that are joining us via Zoom. So there's a camera in the back, just so you know. So this is being carried via Zoom, and we will get probably some people asking questions from Zoom. I think also some of you are given the opportunity to put down questions on a note card, and I'll use those note card questions too as we sort of intersperse that with your live questions, okay? So with that said, let me introduce the folks who are going to be giving you some of this information, all the information tonight. Damon Douglas is here. He is Coastal Manager of Disaster Recovery for St. Johns County, and he's here on my left. And then we also have with us Al Browder, who is a Senior Engineer with Olson Associates, Coastal Engineering Consultants. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys, and then we'll go to Q&A after that.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Good, great. All right, so we have some information to share with you tonight. So first, we've gone through introductions. We want to give you a little bit about why we're here, what we've done over the years since we've been interacting together, a little bit about what's going on at the beach, and the project, the exciting part, the project that's coming. And then we'll talk a little bit about funding. So if you have any friends or neighbors that were planning on attending Wednesday night, we are not going to be able to host that meeting with the threat of inclement weather. We are told we have to batten down the facility here. So this will be online. They'll be able to find this meeting, and we are always open to questions one-on-one. There'll be some contact information for coastal management here. Okay, so those of you that were here in 2018 have seen this exact vision before. So we had Hurricanes Matthew and Irma, pretty bad nor'easter right after Irma, and the community started coming to the county saying, we're seeing some bad damages to our beaches here. These are important beaches. What can we do together to help to preserve this? So, we've come to a project that can help to fend off some of the erosional forces that we see on the beach. We're trying to do it in such a way that it would qualify as an engineered beach in FEMA terminology, which means that they would be able to participate in restoration of the beach if it was impacted by a large named storm. So there's study. The community came to us in the beginning. They had gotten with some other folks in Olson Associates, kind of did a look back at the erosion. At that time, 2.4 million cubic yards of sand lost since 1986. Big losses from Matthew and Irma. And the conditions, sometimes they level off, but they've continued to erode. We're seeing worse erosion at some times. So the area we're looking at for the project is the entirety of Ponte Vedra Beach from the Duval County line down to the oceanfront properties of the Guana GTM NUR, the ocean park there. And we're looking at 2 million cubic yards of sand. So it's a quite robust project. It averages to say 40, 50 cubic yards per linear foot of beach. So as I said, the community really has the kudos for really kickstarting the county, getting this project going. We came here, met here a couple of times in 2018, had a series of surveys. Many of you folks have come to the Board of County Commissioners meetings on several times as we hit various milestones and get authorization for different steps. We have Olson Associates, Al Browder here online with the county. We have gotten permits to do the work from the DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers. We have a lease for an offshore sand source that we could dredge and place sand on the beach from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. Quite a trick. It was 3 years to get them to approve our use of the offshore sand. So the big news is that in this past legislative session with the state, they allotted $25 million towards this specific project. So with previous special appropriations, we are totaling around 30 million from the state, and the county has over the years budgeted a little over $8 million for the project. So our project costs are at 40 million. We have 38.4 million available. So we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end. And of course, once we build it, as far as the permits are concerned, we have to monitor it. We have to look at how much sand is left, where is the sand moving, how is this affecting sea turtle nesting, bird nesting. There's quite a lot of work that goes along with that. And then in order for FEMA to consider it an engineered beach, we'll have a maintenance plan, which means we'll have to be analyzing that information, looking at, when we would need to come back and do repairs to the beach and have some plan of preparation for when that eventuality happens. So these are some newer pictures. These are right after Nicole from the Florida Division of Emergency Management took these helicopter photos. So really the best survey data that we have historically was from 2011. That was the first time that there were full-scale surveys out into the point of closure in the ocean. And so looking from that time with the data that we have, we can tell that the northern third of the project clearly benefits from the Army Corps project up in Duval County. The prevailing movement of sand along our coast is north to south. So we see a lot of that sand trickling into our beaches. But the dunes have been hit by several storms. They've eroded, lowered. There is about a mile section towards the lower center of the beach that is designated by the DEP as critically eroded. And they have a very detailed definition of what's required to be termed that. We also had a FEMA project where we came back and patched some of the dunes. A lot of you saw that. You couldn't miss the trucks. So that was a truck hauled project, a much smaller, it's a lot less sand than what we're talking about. It's a little less than a quarter of the sand that we'd be talking about spread just along the dunes. So that's helped us. It's been a Band-Aid that has kind of given us a little bit more durability until we can get around towards this larger project that we're considering. So the project, so it's basically will include the dune and the flat part of the beach. So if both of those are damaged, we can claim that's part of our designed beach. That's part of our template. We don't intend to do too much to the dunes in those areas where they're healthy and the FEMA sand is still in place. we're not anticipating, building giant dunes in front of the houses. We'll keep them, towards the level that they are now throughout the project. Mostly you'll see sand along the flat part of the beach, what we'll call the berm. And as you can see, this is what a larger scale dredge project looks like. It's a tremendous amount of sand hitting the beach very quickly, a lot of heavy equipment. They're very busy, but it goes by very fast. They come and they go within a few months. It is nowhere near as arduous the process as when we're bringing sand from across the state in trucks. So this is an engineering drawing of the cross section of the beach. A lot of good information in here. What you don't know is that this is kind of in a compressed format. From the horizontal is really squished. So this same picture would actually look like this. So when you see in the green, the steep slope at the dune, it's not a steep slope. But this being able to have a condensed version lets us talk about the different parts. And we'll just touch on it briefly. Al is here for some questions immediately afterwards. And then he has a station set up in the back if you really want to delve into more of the engineering details. But basically, this tells us that we're going to build the flat part of the beach up to 8 feet above sea level. The top of the dunes should be 13 foot above sea level. This is about is this 100 feet that we're pushing out the high tide line?
Probably that's bigger than the average, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It varies in different areas. We'll see as we go along that the project is much smaller in the north, where we talked about we've seen sand trickle down from the Duval County Army Corps project. Then in the central part where we have the critically eroded area, they've lost so much sand already. They have a hole. We kind of have to fill the hole so that we can have a more uniform beach that will be more resilient to storms in the future. So I won't belabor this part of it. We are getting sand from offshore. If you can see this, the solid black line is the 9-mile project area. It's about 4 miles offshore from the southern area. And we will have, here's one of my favorite pictures. So basically how they do this is this ship will sail out to the sand source, and they will chop off the first 10, 12 foot of sand in these deep water shoals. So there may be 30, 40 foot of depth, and they'll take the sand, it's into the belly of the ship. They sail closer to the shore. We're about a 1/4 mile offshore, excuse me. There is a pipe. The pipe goes offshore about a 1/4 mile. It comes to a T on the beach. So the ship will connect to that pipe and start pumping sand onto the beach. Where the picture that we saw previously, bulldozers will push the sand. It comes out as a slurry, sand mixed with water, and they push the sand out of that slurry up into a berm. They have a lot of restrictions. They're heavily monitored so that we're not impacting endangered species such as sea turtles, whales, that type of thing. It's a pretty good process. It's been well used, and it's reliable. So as we said, there are bulldozers. These projects move 24/7, 7 days a week, 24 hours. They're allowed to move a certain distance every night per the permit, depending upon the season. If they can secure an area of the beach, they know that they can move 500 feet down the beach in the dark without impacting any kind of endangered species or the environment. If they can do it responsibly, they're allowed to do that. They generally don't go on all night. But the expense of these types of facilities is they really have to run the project as quickly as they can. You really can't get them to come and say, let me do a 5-day-a-week project. But it will go by rather quickly. I'm thinking 3 or 4 months for this whole area. You know, weather, mechanical breakdowns can change that schedule. So 200 to 600 foot a day of shoreline advance. They will fence off probably 1,500 foot of beach where they'll actively be, you know, pumping out what you see on the screen here, all of the equipment, the piles of pipe. That's where the pit that they're spraying the sand and water into. And they'll actually be constructing the beach, probably 200 to 600 foot of the beach constructed a day. So this whole operation shouldn't be in front of any particular house for more than 2 to 4 days. Again, I mean, mechanical failures, weather, that type of thing could delay it. But you shouldn't have to have it in front of your house for very long. As we said, there's a shore pipe where they have pipe running out into past the waves where the ship connects to. That shore pipe will be moved. They won't just use one place and run the pipe all the way down the beach. They'll pick up that shore pipe and they'll move it to several points down the beach, probably say 5 points. It's really up to the contractor, how, you know, the cost benefit of running pipe down the beach versus moving the pipe, but they won't do the whole thing from one section. So if you have the shore pipe, you know, near your house, that pipe shouldn't be there for more than 1 to 4 weeks. And when you see the pipe, it's hard to see in the screen. It's about 36-inch metal pipe. So it's, you know, this tall. And they will build sand ramps over it so that you can walk over the over the pipe to get down on the beach and out to the water. Those sand ramps wash away. The contractor will come back and put them back daily so that you can access the beach. And this is the goal for a finished beach, kind of typical. What we'll see is once you have this is freshly constructed. It will, by design, erode in an area. It's called equilibration. So there's part of, and I'm going to go back to the fancy engineering drawing. You can see that part of this is underwater. The light colored, can't really see it in this, but this is the existing ground with the beach. This is the fill. So part of this fill is below the water line. In order to get that, they can't put that out there. So they know that if they put Al designs, you know, if you put a certain amount of sand up on the beach, it should erode down into that area. So by putting sand out there in the sandbars, it pushes back the areas where the waves break so that they have less impact on the shore. So you will see over the first few months where the project will equilibrate quickly. And we can see here we have the prediction of equilibrated profile. So it starts out with this big wedge, and then after a few months it should look like this, more sand further out into the ocean. So that's by design. Don't worry when you see that, you know, that within the first few weeks a lot of sand is going away. That's going to happen. It's supposed to happen. So when can we do this? So once we're told to go, it should take us 3 months that we have to advertise and go through the process of soliciting bids and accepting a winning bid and getting the contract. It could take 2 months for them to bring the ship down and all the pipe and get ready to go. And then construction, 5 to 6 months is a fairly conservative estimate. So funding, as I said, we have $38.4 million. Our estimate for the construction of the project is about $40 million. So there's a potential shortfall of $1.6 million. So we've come a long way from, you know, no funding to now, we're very, very close to everything that we would need for the construction. Our conservative estimate of the cost for monitoring and planning over the next 5 years, about $700,000 a year. And again, that, you know, is required by the permits and helps us with potential FEMA assistance. So there are municipal service taxing units in place. When we met here in 2018, the purpose of those meetings were to discuss those taxing districts. There were surveys among property owners. The board created some taxing units, and they are in place now. So there's 2 of them. You can see here the yellow in the northern 3 miles is a separate taxing unit from the lower 6 miles. And there has been no millage levied to date. So the taxing districts are on there. You'll see them, you know, listed on the property appraiser when they send your truth and millage. But so far, no millage is levied. None is in this budget for this year. So the board of county commissioners, the Tuesday after tomorrow, will be discussing the project and, you know, looking at the funding we have, discussing the remaining shortfalls. I mean, we have a $40 million estimate. That doesn't mean that we can't get a bid that comes in at, say, $35 million. Most of the projects that we've done lately, they've all come in under our estimate. That's not to say there's a reason why the estimate's that high, because you can definitely get them that are much higher. So right now it's an anticipated shortfall, but it's not real yet. So the board may discuss like some kind of levy, proposing a levy, and then they would ask us to talk to you about it. This whole process involving any kind of taxing district has been that the board wants to assist the community if that's what the community wants. So we anticipate that they'll ask us to come to you with another survey that said, you know, are you willing to be assessed, you know, up to this amount per year to cover these shortfalls and maintenance type activities. Also, a state requirement is that we have to memorialize where the property line is before the project. So right now at the average high tide line, and there's a specific way that a surveyor has to determine where that is, the mean high water line. Landward of that is the oceanfront property owner. Seaward of that is the lands of the state of Florida. So state law requires that we have to memorialize where that line is, because now we're going to push out the high tide line. There's going to be 100 foot of extra beach. So in the critically eroded area, that 0.9 miles, the law requires that we create what's called an erosion control line. And that's a process that the DEP does. So October 19th at the GTM NER facility on Guana River Road, their museum there, we'll have a meeting where we'll have a workshop to discuss what is the project, what's involved in creating an erosion control line, and then immediately after, you'll see the same presentation as they have the public hearing to set the erosion control line. There's a DEP hearing officer that will be there that will take any comments that are made, and then there's a long process in Tallahassee where they actually record that survey to say this is where the line was. So most of the area is not in a critically eroded area. So the direction we've gotten from the DEP is just survey where that mean high water line is and just record it in the records locally so that they can refer back to it if there was any question in the future. You know, if you wanted to build a casino out in front of your house or something like that, they could say, no, this is where the state property was. So that's really what we have for you today. Quick, easy. So we have time for some questions. There are some folks on Zoom. We'll take some, you know, brief questions up here, and then we'll come down and we'll be able to get into more in-depth questions or one-on-one discussions.
Thank you, Damon. So
Contact information.
So this is how we can do this. If you would like to raise your hand, I'll come to you. You can ask the question, whatever question you'd like to ask. And all I ask is that you just give us your first name so that we can keep this kind of cordial. Yes.
First name is Michael. I know in the last time we had the FEMA dune, everybody had to sign a variance in order to allow that work to be done in front of their home. And people who didn't sign it, they did not do the work in front of their home. Obviously, this project, you can't bypass someone's home. Is that correct?
It is possible to bypass a home or two or, a few, but there is a point at which it makes it undoable. If there's every other property wants to participate for some long stretch, that's not feasible to build. So other entities, the Army Corps will not allow you to have any holdouts anymore. But since it's a county project, it is possible that if some folks weren't going to participate, we could build around them. But yes, we will need easements. Well, it's kind of a complicated question. It really shouldn't be, but we did get easements at the same time that we were working towards this current FEMA project. And there was some discussion about, should we be able to use those for larger projects like this? And I think that discussion is still slightly open-ended. So I anticipate we're probably going to hear something about that on the 5th as to a determination. But yes, we have right now 218 out of 272 easements.
I received one for the FEMA dune, and then subsequently received another one where we provided like either a lifetime or a 5-year easement for this project.
Yes.
All right. Next question.
My name is Tom, and I'm concerned about all of the sand that was put out by this trucks. They did a great job, but it built up the area of my beach walkover, that my beach walkover is covered to some extent. Will this impact more sand on top of the area where they put the sand from the trucks, so that my beach walkover might get buried even further?
We don't have the intention in the project plan to add on top of the dunes that were placed during that project. So if that sand is still there, the dune is still intact in your area, we may not have to do very much of it at all. If anything, we may add to the front of the dune. Most of the work will be in increasing the flat part of the beach below the toe of the dune there.
Next question. Any other questions?
My name is Heather. I just have a question about, I'm not sure if it's FEMA or Army Corps of Engineer, but there's been so many memos circulated to all of us in Old Ponte Vedra about these different sand projects that I'm not sure I have them all straight. But I feel like at one point, if we had accepted money from some certain government agency, there was speculation they were going to be adding parking and increasing, like putting trolley service around Old Ponte Vedra to drop people off at the beach accesses. So other than potential tax assessment, are there any other strings that come with this project that might impact those of us that live in that neighborhood?
So there was a feasibility study done by the Army Corps of Engineers to see if there was a section of the beach that would qualify for an Army Corps project. And the Army Corps regulations do require that there is a federal interest in the project, and they determine that by public access. If you're a taxpayer from Oklahoma, can you park and walk less than a quarter mile to get down to the beach and see the sand that you helped to pay for? There's no requirement for us to be able to do this project. We don't have to add any access. We just have to do the project in the way that is prescribed by the environmental regulators. And that's it. So no strings where we have to build parks or parking lots or trolleys.
Hi, David. John. This might be a little in the weeds, and maybe our friend Olson might be able to add on to this. But for those who live in the critically eroded area, there are some cliffs that are 15, 16, 20 feet that exceed that plus 13, I think you had up there above the MSL. Is there a way, possibly down the road, to apply for either a waiver of some kind or ask for additional assistance to level that off? Because a cliff of 22 feet, say, at 13, you just look at a 9-foot gap there, and there might be a danger risk or something like that. You could have that kind of a cliff that still exists. Would that be possible, or is that something to be entertained down the road?
So the DEP permitted us to build a dune that was 13 foot high. So it would require a permit mod. To modify a joint coastal permit, could take anywhere from 90 days to 6 months. So it's within the realm of possibility. It may be something that we look at as some kind of supplementary thing later on. We'll have to look at it. We don't want to leave something that is dangerous, but if there's a slope that slopes down to another dune, that's kind of what we see, around the coast, is you usually have like rows of dunes that go lower as they get closer to the ocean. So as these things kind of settle in, if we, get lucky, they're not immediately destroyed in some kind of major storm, as the sea oats kind of take hold, they should kind of blend together a little bit. As we see where we build the dunes, where they have like a sharper edge, eventually they kind of blend. So those slopes become less like cliffs and a more gentle slope. But we'll have to look at it. That'd be something we should talk about one-on-one.
Hi, Sham. You mentioned the timeline of how long it takes to get the process going. What are you anticipating when it starts? If everything goes like planned, when do you think it will start?
So the critical pieces that have to be in place, other than the board tell us to go do it, would be we need to have the easement, and we need to have the erosion control line and mean high water line surveys in place. So we are anticipating that we could, at the very earliest, say November, December, we could pull the trigger on.
Hi, Sanjay. First, just a comment. I think it's fantastic that we're doing this. This beach is so badly eroded. It needs it desperately. Two questions. One is, when we put sand before, including the FEMA project, hurricanes that have ensued have basically washed most of that sand out. What will make this more durable? Is it just the volume of the sand? Is it the change in the contour of the beach? But I'd just like to know that we're creating a durable solution. Second question is, in order to get the easements, just what else do you need from us? I haven't been given a easement to sign. I was for the FEMA project, but if there's another one, I'd like to just make sure I do it and provide it to you. So if you could just give us some sense of what the timeline is, of what you need from us, and when it will be coming, that would be helpful.
Sure. So second question first. If you gave us an easement for the second FEMA project after Nicole, that will be discussed whether we can or cannot use those easements. We do have, if you have not, we do have some folks in the back that on this side that could help you execute an easement if you want to, or they could at least give it to you. And you can always contact us. We'll make sure that you're in touch with the right person. So we're just trying to finalize that direction before we really push with the easement. So as far as the first question, I've been kind of hogging the mic. So I'm going to let our professional engineer answer that question about durability.
I think you answered the question in your question. It really is a matter of the volume that's placed on the beach. The projects that have been built to date have been built under FEMA guidelines, and the FEMA guidelines thus far are basically the Band-Aid, to get you through the next event, so to speak. So with the size of the project that we're talking about here, any damage to the beach, the goal is for all of that to occur well out in front of your dunes, your vegetated areas, your walkovers, so that the coming and the going of the sand occurs in an area where it really doesn't have any detrimental effect to you. And so the project will be a lot bigger. I mean, that's the simplest thing. It's much, much bigger.
Okay. I'll get right back to you. We have one question from our Zoom audience, and here's the question, or the statement rather, maybe. This seems like a land grab. My current property line is well into the ocean. The state will be confiscating 60 to 100 feet of property currently on my deed. How can this be fair?
So that's not county policy. It's state law. Is that the property line moves with the average high tide line. So as the beach erodes, that property line moves. It really moves day to day. If a lot of sand washes up after a storm, then your property line is a little further out. If it erodes during a different storm, it's closer in. So where that line is already a matter of state law. I know that some of these lots, they were platted back when there was more beach, and it does extend further into the ocean. And that's really outside the scope of this meeting, the exact real estate law of where your particular line is. And the public hearing and workshop is there specifically for those type of discussions. If there is some kind of issue with that, then that can be brought up with the DEP hearing officer at that time, and that's the appropriate forum.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Here's one other Zoom question, then I'll get to you. Will there be a published schedule of which part of the beach will be under construction when?
Yes. Once we have a contractor on board, that will be a requirement before they begin to propose to us what their schedule is. We have, for the project that's going on now, the Army Corps, after we instigated it with the last Army Corps project in Volano, have taken it on as their normal practice to require that the contractor update a map every week that says when they expect to be at each of the next areas. They break it up into blocks, and depending upon their project progress, that will change week to week. So we will have that information posted and available, and stay in contact with us.
I had a couple of questions all interrelated about the taxes for the project. So when this started several years ago, there was lots of discussion at meetings in Ponte Vedra and in St. Augustine about bed tax and what percentage of that was going to be allocated to beach renourishment. So is that where some of the funds that the county is putting forward is coming from? And then also had a question about the two different MSTUs and if that difference is just based on the volume of sand needed in those two areas. And then lastly, 5 or more years ago, 6 years ago is when this all started. There was mention about the renourishment done in St. Augustine and how St. Augustine has a tax that is for the whole county that provides for their ongoing maintenance. It sounds like we're going to have over $700,000 a year that needs to be spent just to monitor this. So I don't know if that includes sand, putting it back on the beach. I know Duval County does it every certain 5 or 10 years. And I believe in St. Augustine, the further away you lived from the beach, the less there was of your taxes, their property taxes that went, the less you were assessed. So I'm just wondering what our county is looking at, whether it's bed tax, property tax, or if it's only going to be these assessments on the beachfront homeowners. Thank you.
So the money that we had mentioned that the county has budgeted so far have all been from, actually, I take that back. Most of it has been from the tourist development tax revenues. So as you say, throughout these meetings, there was discussion about the tourist development tax and its use for projects like this. This project was mentioned among other projects. And they did enact a 5th cent to the bed tax, the tourist development tax. So all of that 5th cent goes into a reserve for tourism-related assets, of which beaches are included. So there is, revenue that comes in that can be put towards this project and other projects. We just did one in South Ponte Vedra Beach, where the bed tax is used for some of that debt service. That same area in South Ponte Vedra Beach, which is the 5 miles north of Serenata Beach Club, is very close to having an Army Corps project approved. There's the Army Corps project in Volano. As you mentioned, the St. Augustine Beach project goes on roughly every 5 years. That is heavily subsidized by tourist development tax. Fortunately, that one is mostly federal dollars because they've proven there's a direct cause from the inlet. So we have a very, very favorable cost share. The county winds up paying for like 11% of those projects. We're doing studies in Summer Haven. The southern part of Crescent Beach has now been deemed critically eroded. So, I mean, the board has their work cut out for them and, balancing these different needs to try and budget that. We have seen a lot of changes on our beaches in the relatively recent few years and a lot of projects coming on board. So we do have out now, we're looking for some assistance coming up with a coastal management plan. So a plan that the board can look at and say, yes, we agree to this, that, in later phases will also include more discussions of funding for the board. So we'll see on the 5th. Really, I can't tell you what, the majority of the 5 commissioners will want to do on that date. But these are all possible solutions to that.
One of the benefits too of being here in person is you'll be able to speak with them one-on-one, sort of open house style, once we wrap this up in a few minutes.
Yes.
But here are a couple of other questions from Zoom. One is, are there any potential downsides of FEMA involvement?
So FEMA will not be involved in this project. It could be in later instances when there's a repair. Basically, they tell you how much sand you qualify for, and you have to build it back according to permit. So we have a permit for a certain template, but they don't really dictate as far as like public access or I can't think of other like things that they would require. Basically, FEMA's big concern is like, is it related to the storm and is the accounting correct? So if we lose sand, they'd say, how much sand did you actually lose? Is some of it in the sandbars? We'll have to subtract that. And they'll pay for a portion of the losses that can be attributed to the storm and aren't still out in the sandbars. So there's not very many strings that, the community has to worry about. And we will be, on a hamster wheel.
Another question from a Zoom audience member. What are the 5 to 10 year results of similar projects like this that have been done on the East Coast?
Well, for example, the pictures that we showed during the course of the presentation are actually from the south end of Amelia Island, which is another locally constructed non-Army Corps project that relies on FEMA funding when storms are involved. It has performed very well. The projects, just so that everyone is clear, these are not one and done types of projects. There is a background erosion rate that will continue on. So you build a beach nourishment project and you plan for a renourishment interval of something that is typically anywhere from, say, 5 or 6 years to up to 10 years. The photos that we showed from Amelia showed it being renourished at year 10. So there is a planning element of building up and being ready for the next project. The $700,000 that Damon mentioned, part of that is a future cost related to permitting and preparation for a renourishment project. In that instance, and in most instances of locally constructed projects, you don't just do it because the calendar said you got to year 8 and it's time to renourish the beach. We survey it, we monitor it, we report back to the county that what percentage of the sand placed was lost in a given year, how has it performed over the last several years, and when time comes, we are making preparations to renourish again. So this is not a one-shot deal. I mean, it is a maintenance program, and it goes on for decades. St. Augustine Beach project is on a 50-year life, like most Army Corps of Engineers projects. So they monitor it. They have a tentative plan in mind as to how well it will perform and how often they have to renourish it. Duval County is the exact same way. So it's a program. It's not a one-time deal, and that's part of the plan. I mean, I'm the coastal engineer, and you ask me how well they work. I say they work great, but everybody needs to understand what they're getting into when you do it. And with that in mind, when you look at the cost-benefit ratio of a beach nourishment project for what kind of dollars it brings into the county, it turns out to be a great deal.
Damon, this is probably a Zoom question for you. How far westward do the municipal tax units extend? Is it only oceanfront homes?
It is east of Ponte Vedra Boulevard. So it is oceanfront homes. There are I can think of at least one condominium complex where, you know, there are some units that are not oceanfront, but they're part of that community that are included in the municipal service taxing district.
And the last question, at least from Zoom, is there a minimum number of construction bids that you would accept?
Generally, we don't require a minimum. We do have the ability to reject bids if we feel like they are outside of our estimates. We do reserve the right to reject them. So if we only get one bid and it's very high, we would most likely put it back out.
So that wraps up our sort of public setting of Q&A. Obviously, these gentlemen are going to be around. If you want to ask some questions after this, they'll be in the back and all around. And ask for your help, too, in letting people know that we're not going to be doing this meeting on Wednesday night because of the storm. So with that said, we thank you very much for participating. Thank you.
Please, this is our contact information, folks at home and here. Let's continue the conversation as questions occur to you.